Most men assume that a woman with pronounced curves must wake up every morning feeling like a walking celebration of her own body. The logic is simple. If the world stares, compliments, even obsesses, how could she not be confident? But here's the psychological twist you rarely consider. Confidence isn't the automatic byproduct of attention. It's the hard-won result of navigating that attention without losing herself. Picture a girl in her early teens whose body matured faster than her classmates. Overnight, she went from invisible to hyper-visible. The boys' curiosity became blatant. The girls' chatter turned competitive. Teachers commented on dress code for her own good. Family friends passed jokes at gatherings. She quickly discovered that her body entered every room 2 seconds before her words did. That spotlight can feel intoxicating from the outside, but living in it forces a choice: either crumble under everyone else's projections or forge an unshakable sense of self. That forging process is where her real confidence is born. She learns to separate genuine compliments from objectifying noise. She develops radar for thirsty energy versus respectful curiosity. She masters the micro-expressions. Does your gaze meet her eyes before it drifts lower, or does it never make the trip back up? While many women have to refine intuition over years, a curvy woman hones it in self-defense. When every grocery run feels like an audition, you learn to read people faster than they can speak. Here's what most men miss. The stronger her presence appears, the more trials she has likely endured to build it. It's not easy confidence, it's earned composure. Yes, she can walk into a party with a sway that turns necks, but notice how calmly she handles the extra eyes, how easily she deflects the crude remark without losing warmth. That is practiced poise. Behind it sits a ledger of boundary violations, unwanted comments on body goals, and so-called compliments that felt more like claims of ownership. Her calm is her armor. Her smile is strategy. Confidence became a survival skill long before it became a vibe. Understanding that history is the key to connecting with her. When you reduce her to a flattering silhouette, you drop yourself into the same category she spent years filtering out. But when you recognize the weight her poise carries, the resilience beneath the aesthetics, you trigger something rare: respect. Respect is the doorway to authentic rapport. And authentic rapport is the one currency her intuition can't counterfeit. So what should you do differently? Acknowledge the obvious without overindulging it. Compliment her style, not just her shape. Ask a question that proves you listened to her last answer. Most importantly, hold eye contact with steadiness, not hunger. That single act tells her you see a person first, a body second. And paradoxically, when she feels seen beyond the curves, she becomes more willing to share the confidence you admired in the first place. So together, let's take our confidence to share the confidence you admired in the first place. Remember this: her curves might announce her presence, but her confidence is a language she spent years perfecting. If you can't speak that language of depth, nuance, and earned strength, you'll remain just another spectator. Speak it fluently, and you'll meet the woman whose self-assurance was never handed to her. It was hammered into shape, one unsolicited comment at a time. One of the biggest misconceptions men have about women, especially women with physically striking features, is this: they think that just because a woman receives attention, she must also enjoy it. That she's constantly flattered, empowered, even validated by the number of stares she collects when walking into a room. But that's not how reality works, especially not for women who've spent years being defined by one part of their body. Attention isn't always admiration, and it certainly isn't always welcome. You see, for a woman with a body that turns heads, attention is never neutral. It always carries intention. And she learns very quickly that those intentions aren't always pure. Some men look at her like she's a conquest. Others make assumptions about her sexual availability just because of how she fills out a dress. And over time, that attention becomes less of an ego boost and more of a constant filtering process: who's safe, Who's just staring, who's listening, and who only sees flesh. That's why you'll often find that these women are incredibly guarded, not because they're arrogant, but because they've been forced to protect their space. Every compliment is measured. Every flirtation is analyzed. Every conversation starts with one question running silently in the back of her mind. Do you actually see me, or do you only see the parts of me that you want to touch? It's exhausting. Imagine being known before being understood, desired before being respected. That's the experience many curvy women carry. And they carry it quietly, often with a smile that masks how often they've had to excuse themselves from men who meant well, but didn't listen well. Listen well, sex is powerful. Listen, even if you're a guy, listen up, because one day you may need to protect yourself from men who meant well, but didn't listen well. So when she meets a man who slows down, who isn't intoxicated by the surface, but curious about the soul behind it, that's a breath of fresh air. A man who doesn't rush to compliment her body, but instead leads with grounded conversation, eye contact, and emotional clarity, that man stands out. He disrupts the pattern. He becomes the exception, not the expectation. But here's the irony. Some men think withholding attention is the key, that pretending not to notice her curves will make them seem deep or different. It doesn't. That's not awareness. It's avoidance. The truth is, she doesn't want you to ignore her body. She wants you to honor it, acknowledge it, not obsess over it. Recognize the fullness of her femininity without reducing her to it. When you can do that, you instantly separate yourself from the noise. Because women with big bodies and big energy aren't lacking attention. They're lacking intention. And if you want her respect, you'll need to bring more than attraction to the table. You'll need presence, purpose, emotional intelligence, the kind of masculine energy that isn't intimidated by beauty and isn't distracted by shape. So don't assume that attention is the goal. Most women aren't starving for your eyes. They're craving your depth. If all you bring is attraction, you'll just become another forgettable moment in a life filled with glances. But if you bring awareness, sincerity, and real connection, now that's unforgettable. Because in a world obsessed with looking, the man who truly sees her will always win. Her mind, not just her body. One thing that sets women with big curves apart, especially those who've lived in the spotlight of male attention, is their emotional radar. Over time, they become masters at reading energy, reading motives, and reading men, and not because they studied psychology or read some dating guide, but because real life gave them no choice. When your body speaks louder than your words, you learn fast that not every smile is sincere, and not every compliment is a compliment. So what most men don't realize is that these women are constantly scanning, not to judge, but to protect. They're tuned into the microsignals, how long your eyes linger, the slight delay between your words and your intentions, the tone behind your flattery. You might think you're being smooth, but she's already decided whether you're emotionally safe, sexually hungry, or just passing through. You have to understand, this is survival, not suspicion. For a woman whose figure constantly draws attention, learning to read people is not a flirtation tactic, it's emotional self-defense. She's learned the difference between interest and entitlement, between being admired and being objectified. So when you approach her thinking you're clever, confident, or charming, but all your energy is wrapped up in her body, she sees it instantly. But here's the part that most men overlook. She's not offended by attraction. She knows she's attractive. She's comfortable with that. She's even flattered by it. When it's grounded, when it's respectful, when it's paired with genuine presence, the issue is not the desire. The issue is the disconnection. When your energy is all in your eyes or in your anticipation and not in your awareness, you're not seeing her. You're reacting to a fantasy you've already constructed. And that's why many of these women seem reserved, guarded, even emotionally distant when you first meet them. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they feel deeply, and they've learned how to protect their space from men who can't match that depth. So if you lead with performance instead of presence, if you try to impress her before you try to understand her, you're already fading into the background. What gets her attention isn't just confidence, it's emotional congruence. That means what you say, what you feel, and what you project are in alignment. When you speak with clear intent, when your compliments aren't coated in hidden agendas, when your interest is steady, not overhyped or insecure, that's when she starts to soften. Because now, you're not just another man reacting to her appearance. You're a man who's attuned enough to handle her reality. She knows the difference, trust me, and she knows it fast. So if you ever find yourself in conversation with a woman like this and feel her relax, even just a little, know this. It's not because you said the right thing. It's because your energy told her she could stop analyzing and start connecting. And that's the point. Your energy speaks louder than your words. So lead with grounded presence, not anticipation, because the man who is attuned, not just attracted, will always find his way past her radar and into something real. She doesn't need your lines. She needs your awareness. Show her that, and she'll show you the side of her that most men never get close enough to earn. Most men think that the way to win a woman with a striking body is to keep reminding her of how beautiful, sexy, or irresistible she is. They imagine that by showering her with compliments about her curves, they're somehow rising above the competition. But what they don't understand? She's heard it all before. Every version of it, every attempt to stand out by stating the obvious. And at some point, it all becomes white noise. You need to understand something deeper. For women who are constantly praised for their bodies, physical compliments lose their value unless they're connected to something more meaningful. She doesn't need a man to notice her body. She knows how it looks, she knows how it moves, she knows what it evokes. But what she craves, what truly captures her attention, is depth. Not because she's hard to impress, but because she's tired of being seen in pieces.t. Tired of being broken down into legs, hips, waist, or ass. What she wants is someone who sees the whole. So while most men are focused on praising what she already knows, the man who engages her mind, who listens, who challenges her thoughts, who asks her why she believes what she believes, that man immediately earns a different kind of access. He becomes interesting, not because he's ignoring her beauty, but because he's not controlled by it. It's the same reason why women with physical magnetism often light up when a man brings humor, intelligence, or emotional presence into the interaction. The reason why women with physical magnetism often light up when a man brings humor, intelligence, or emotional presence into the interaction is because both men and women are physical magnetism. You can think of it as a kind of interactive safety drive. Like with a girlfriend, if you want to have a good night's sex, you make it possible for her to go on. She's not used to being spoken to like her words matter. And so when you meet her with substance, when you genuinely explore her perspective rather than her measurements, something rare happens. She lets her guard down. That's when the connection begins to shift. Now, that doesn't mean physical appreciation is wrong. On the contrary, it's essential. But only when it's sincere, specific, and delivered without neediness. You look incredible tonight hits differently when it's not followed by overpleasing energy or performance. When it's said by a man who's centered, who's grounded, who doesn't need anything back, then it feels real. Then it feels earned. And let's be clear, women can feel the difference. They can tell when a compliment is an offering versus when it's a fishing line for attention. And the man who doesn't need her validation, who knows her beauty doesn't overpower his own worth, that's the man she becomes curious about. Because ultimately, she's not looking for a fan. She's looking for a mirror. Someone who reflects not just her attractiveness, but her intelligence, her softness, her ambition, and her humanity. Someone who sees all of her, not just the part the world keeps pointing out. So if you want to stand out, stop leading with the obvious. Start exploring her complexity. Compliment her body, yes, but only after you've shown her that you can connect with her mind. Because once a woman feels seen beyond what's visible, That's when the connection becomes magnetic, on her terms, not yours. The man who makes her feel understood will always be more powerful than the man who only makes her feel desired. Here's a truth many men never stop to consider. Just because a woman has a body that's admired, even sexualized, doesn't mean she has always admired it. In fact, some of the most physically celebrated women have walked long, quiet roads filled with body shame, self-comparison, and internal conflict. What you see now, the curves, the confidence, the poise, is often the product of years spent wrestling with insecurity, not freedom from it. A lot of women with curvier bodies grew up in environments where they were told to cover up, be careful, or tone it down. Their bodies developed before their sense of identity could catch up, and instead of being celebrated for who they were reduced to how they looked. Some were called fast. Others were told they were asking for it, simply by existing. Even in moments when they didn't want attention, it found them. On the subtext, discomfort and fear and suffering. 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 And that taught them early on to associate their shape with danger, guilt, or unwanted responsibility. Now, fast forward to adulthood. Many of these women now wear their bodies with pride, yes, but that pride came after a battle, a private one. They had to unlearn years of cultural shame, unlearn media stereotypes, unlearn the fear that their worth was limited to male validation. That's why you'll often notice this contrast. A woman who looks incredibly secure in her skin, but who still has small habits of self-protection, the tug of her shirt, the shift of her posture, the way she deflects a compliment with a half joke. Those aren't random. Those are echoes. And here's what matters. If you want to connect with a woman like this, truly connect, you have to respect the duality. You have to understand that her confidence isn't always consistent, that she can love her body and still have days where she questions it, that her sensuality isn't a performance for men. It's a part of her identity she's still learning to own without apology. That's where your awareness comes in. When you speak to her, how do you talk about her body? Is it admiration or obsession? Is it appreciation or fixation? When you touch her, is it affirming or claiming? These questions matter more than you think, because for a woman with a love-hate history with her body, how you hold space for her in that vulnerability tells her everything about whether she can trust you, not just physically, but emotionally. Real masculinity, especially the kind women crave today, isn't just confident, it's considerate. It knows how to hold her when she's radiant and when she's unsure. It doesn't take her self-love for granted, and it never tries to use her body as a shortcut to closeness. So next time you meet a woman who carries both beauty and depth, don't assume that her body tells the whole story. It doesn't. Her true story is written in resilience, in healing, in the small victories of choosing to love herself anyway. And if you're the kind of man who can see that, really see it, you won't just touch her body. You'll touch the parts of her most men never even get close to. There's something you need to understand about women who radiate sensual energy, especially those with bodies society labels as desirable. That kind of energy doesn't come from trying. It's not about wearing tight clothes, walking a certain way, or acting sexy. It's often just there. Natural, magnetic, impossible to ignore. But here's the truth most men overlook. How you respond to that energy says everything about you. You see, when a woman knows that her presence has an effect, she's not surprised when men get nervous or overly eager. She's seen it all before. The overcompensating jokes, the forced confidence, the sudden drop in eye contact. What she rarely sees, though, is a man who stays grounded and competent and courageous. Her energy is attracted by sexuality. She sees it as a token, a call. A man who acknowledges her beauty without being thrown off balance. That kind of masculine composure, that's rare. And that's what gets her attention. When a man can sit in the presence of her energy without trying to dominate it or shrink from it, he signals something powerful: emotional maturity. He's not led by lust or performance. He's not scrambling for approval. He's steady. He doesn't need to win her. He just needs to witness her. And that alone creates space, safe space, for her to relax, unfold, and actually be herself. This is where so many men get it wrong. They either overreact, making everything about her body, her vibe, her looks, or they try to play it cool by pretending not to notice. But she doesn't need you to ignore her sensuality. That's not respect. That's fear disguised as detachment. What she needs is for you to receive her energy with presence, to stay connected without becoming consumed. When you fumble that energy, when you rush, over-flirt, or over-sexualize, you make it about you, your desire, your ego, your need to be seen as the guy who can handle her. But when you meet her from a place of intention rather than hunger, the whole dynamic changes. She feels that. And more importantly, she trusts it. Because no matter how confident or empowered a woman may seem, she still wants to feel emotionally safe, especially with a man. She wants to know that her sensuality won't be weaponized, that her curves won't be used against her, and that her softness won't be exploited for validation. The man who offers that safety, who holds her energy without needing to possess it, is the man she'll keep coming back to. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about being deeply rooted in who you are. When she feels that you're centered, unshaken by her body, unbothered by surface energy, she's more likely to bring the real her forward. Not the performative version, not the guarded one, but the woman behind the beauty, behind the attention, behind the armor. So don't just admire her energy, match it. Not with force, but with stillness. Not with lines, but with clarity. Because when you can stay calm in the presence of the very thing most men lose themselves to, you prove something few men can. You're not chasing her energy, you're anchoring it. And that, more than anything, is what makes you unforgettable.